Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy. Yeah! Or, as the United States Secret Service called me, the original internet godfather. Now, how did I get that title? 39 felonies, a place on the United States most wanted list, an escape from prison, and I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor of today's darknet and darknet markets. It laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. All those 39 felonies, well, they had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime as we now know it. If you want to point your finger at some bitch, point it this way. And yes, that does get you sent to prison, deservedly so. Now, look, there's a whole story behind all this. We ain't got time for today because today, right now, it's time for the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, refunding fraud. When we come back. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, refunding fraud. And boy, let me tell you, today's episode is off the chain. We are off the chain today. Why are we off the chain? Well, I'll tell you why we're off the chain. It's this Netflix show, Web of Make-Believe. I absolutely love the show. I've watched, I've only watched my episodes. I got to be honest with you. I've only watched my episodes. As a matter of fact, I learned today that evidently Brian Krebs is on the on one of the shows as well. I guess what people don't know is that the guy who sent Brian Krebs drugs and tried to set him up used to be one of my guys. Yeah, it's a small criminal circle. It's a very small criminal world. That's probably why I like that damn ride at Disney World so much. I love It's a Small World. I go around and I shake my little head. Smile. I'm just saying. That's the way it is. But I do like the show's outstanding. It's Ron Howard's production company. Just a truly outstanding show. If you guys have not watched it yet, please watch it. Watch it. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the show. I got a few comments today talking about how awesome I was and how funny I was. And I was like, shit, I like to hear that. I also had a meeting today with this television show that we're going to try to get off the ground that is about me. So I'll be the host of it. And you know, it's a reality TV show type thing where I can't talk about the specifics of it, but we had another meeting today, and then hopefully in a few weeks, be meeting with the television channel, and we'll go ahead from there, and we'll see. So we'll see if we get the pilot off the ground, and if they like the pilot, they'll order a set of episodes, and we'll go from there. So fingers crossed. As everyone can guess, Brady wants himself a TV show. I ain't gonna lie to you. I want myself a TV show. I like my YouTube channel, and I'm going to keep doing my YouTube channel, but I would sure as shit like to be on the TV. Just saying. Hey, so that's the big comment. Another viewer. So last week I did a show, Common Sense for a Criminal World, and I talked about this Telegram fraudster who goes by the screen name of Noir and how he is a fucking idiot. You know, a sufferer of FIS, fucking idiot syndrome. Well, not only he had that affliction, but a lot of his customers have that affliction as well. It's a terrible, terrible disease. Well, I had one of my viewers on my show. He watched it. He leaves a comment on the show. He was like, hey, man, could I get a copy of that tutorial that you had on your show there? So what happens is in the last episode, I showed a couple of screenshots of a refunding fraud tutorial that walks people through how to do refunding fraud. So I had this guy reach out to me. He's like, hey, man, can I say, if it's not too much trouble, how about sending me a copy of that, or at least tell me where I can get it? Look here, dude, it is not my first day on the job. This is not my first rodeo. So what I will tell you is it's one of the greatest lines in cinematic history uttered by one Jim Carrey on Liar Liar. Stop breaking the law, asshole. No, I don't know if you're an asshole, but I do think that, hey, man, you don't need to be breaking the law, especially something like that. Come on now. There's no need to do that. You're victimizing people. You're raising costs for everyone else. We, at the end of the day, pay for that. So please don't do that. Now, if you're so interested in getting a copy of that tutorial, it's on one of my other websites, Cybercrime 101. I set up this website called cybercrime101.com. And I had intended for it to be this huge platform of cybersecurity and cybercrime with blogs and connections and stories, and too big of a job for Brett Johnson with all the other bullshit that I've got going on right now. So it's been kind of dead. I've not really updated it in several months. I'm actually about to turn it into basically the Drudge Report of cybercrime. So a lot of those pages will disappear. I'll just have that one front page where it's got news stories about cybercrime. That's probably going to be what that site becomes. But in the interim, if you're so interested in refunding fraud, I've got some blogs up there about it. And I've also got the tutorial of which you spake. So, but please don't break the law. That's hard sometimes. It's hard to. So I'm on the dark web. I'm on Telegram. I'm often on, well, not, okay, so I'm on there usually under my name, Brett Johnson or Gollum Fun. So people know who I am. Sometimes I'm on there under another legend that no one knows who I am at that point. But when I'm on there under my name, I have people that reach out to me. And most people are very respectful. I do have some of this younger generation that will shoot me over a question. Hey, man, how about sharing some information, man? Show me how I can make some of that money. To which I respond, well, you're not making money, you're stealing money. And what I would advise you to do is stop breaking the law, get your ass in school, or get a certificate in cybersecurity, maybe fraud, anti-fraud. And the response tends to be, why would I do that when I'm making this much money over here? And it tends to be a decent amount of money these days. A beginning refund fraudster, for example, easily, as long as they've got the startup capital, once they get the capital in pocket, easily $20,000 a week in product, which you're going to then sell that product at 80% retail. So you're going to pocket about $16,000 a week after you sell everything. So it becomes very profitable. Think about this. You're stealing or netting $64,000 a month doing refund fraud, a type of fraud that really has absolutely no skill set whatsoever to engage in. So it becomes very profitable. So answered that guy's question just then. We're going to move right on. So I guess one of the things I want to talk about are the amount of fraudsters that are out there. And I've talked about this before. I'm going to go over it again, and it's going to relate to what we're talking about today, and also the economy comes into play and everything else. But when Shadow Crew ended, so we made the front cover of Forbes, August of 2004. October 26, 2004, the United States Secret Service arrested 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours, and shut down Shadow Crew. We ended with 4,000 members. That was 2004. Fast forward to 2017, the largest criminal network on the planet is called Alphabet. Government and federal authorities shut it down. It ends with 240,000 members. Fast forward 2 more years to 2019. A dark web marketplace by the name of Black Market gets shut down, 1.15 million members. Now, so you see the numbers continue to explode, and there's various reasons for that. A lot of the reason has to do with the refinement of cybercrime as a platform. It's become much more efficient. It works much better, and anymore the criminals are basically plug and play. The sophistication itself comes in the platform, not in the criminals, because the platform delivers unto you the products and services. It trains you on how to do that. It allows you to network with individuals who are good in areas where you are not. It has a trust mechanism there, so you can trust the people that you're working with and learning from. So the platform itself is the sophistication the individual tends not to be. That's largely the reason. You can add in jurisdictional problems, law enforcement problems, siloed security, any number of other areas as well, culminates in why cybercrime continues to explode. The economy also plays a large part in that. So those numbers that I quoted to you were pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, as everyone knows, the world shuts down. The global economy was going to go belly up. So various governments across the planet instituted stimulus programs. In the United States, we had EIDL, we had PPP, we had unemployment insurance. We had all these programs that were designed to keep the economy from collapsing in on itself. The government was desperate to put those programs in place. So they put those programs in place with absolutely no security at all. I've spoke about that before. In fact, the security that was in place, the CARES Act removes some of the security that was in place. So there was no security in place for 6 months. As a result, fraudsters ate it alive. The professional fraudsters, the fraudsters who are, kind of just idiots, they came into it, they were stealing money, everything else. But there was another type of fraudster that enters into that stimulus fraud as well. And that other type of fraudster I'm not sure if you could call it an opportunistic fraudster or a fraudster of necessity. All right. And what I mean by that is these are the individuals who usually would not be breaking the law if not for X. So opportunity arises. So you've got people who would never break the law unless, hey, it's just so damn easy and I'm not going to get caught. Let me try that. So you had those individuals committing stimulus fraud, unemployment fraud specifically. But you also had individuals who lost their jobs, who could not pay their mortgage, who were having trouble putting food on the table, who were not able to make their car payments or any number, or were scared that all of that stuff was going to happen. And of all those people that was happening to, you've got a segment of those people that adopted this kind of philosophy that I used to have. I'm going to do, quote, whatever it takes, end quote, to make sure that me and mine are taken care of. And that was a direct cause of the pandemic and the fear that the economy was going to go belly up. And because a lot of people lost jobs. The statistic was that 85% of all restaurants, by the time we come out of all this bullshit, 85% of all restaurants will close. So it really did hit. Now, the interesting thing is we're coming out of the pandemic, but part of coming out of the pandemic is going into this recession, stagflation. I mean, however bad it's going to get, we're going into that. We've got inflation that's going over 10%. We've got the highest inflation totals in 40 years, I think they said. So you've got an issue there, and the inflation is running out of control. You've got a government, an administration that's in place that has no friggin' clue what they're doing. Now, there may be somebody that disagrees with me on that, and you're welcome to disagree with me on that, but I don't think you can disagree with me at all that they certainly don't instill any confidence in any American that's worried about their job or the economy or making ends meet or putting gas in their car or anything else like that. Because of that, because of the unemployment that's coming, see, the way you get inflation under control is you have to bring prices down. So you raise those interest rates. This last week, we saw an interest rate hike of 0.75. That's going to take place next month. Is going to be 0.5, a half a point or 3/4 of a point. And it's going to continue like that. At the same time, the government is selling a shitload of MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, in order to bring down the market, because when you bring down the market, inflation is going to come down as well. So they're doing all this stuff, which means, it also means that they're going to raise the unemployment rate. Now, here's the big thing. Here's the secret of all this. All right. People today do not really tighten their belt when faced with economic woes. They are not going to decide, well, I want that new Samsung phone, but because we're on a budget, because I've lost my job, because of all this other bullshit, I'm going to have to wait to get it. That's usually not the mindset of Americans. The mindset is, shit, I need me that. Let me get it. So we're going to, and it's not just that mindset. It's also the mindset of the fear of losing your home, not being able to put food on the table, not being able to make your car payments, all this stuff coupled with the, hey, it's Billy's birthday. It's Christmas is coming up. I've got to get gifts. So all that together is going to see an increase in the number of fraudsters that are out there. And a lot of the fraudsters that are coming into the environment, into the cybercrime world, are people who would usually not be breaking the law. And this is where refund fraud comes in. So most people don't know it, I'm the first guy to talk about refund fraud in the legal world. Yeah, I warned merchants and retailers about it, 2017. Warned them about it back in 2017. I was like, hey, right now it's eating Amazon alive. It's coming knocking for you guys. And the response was, well, it was really my first keynote presentation where I started to talk about this. I told everyone what it was, how it happened, and what was going to happen to them in the audience. The problem was I had just got started in my legal career. I was looked at more as a novelty. I had not established all the trust that I've got today and where people listen to the shit that I say these days. So back then I was basically the monkey at the circus. Hey, everybody come see the monkey. He was an internet godfather. He's up here talking right now. Look at him. Look at him. Look at him. He's funny. So they didn't really pay attention to that. And at the same time, they only heard me talking about Amazon. They blocked out that part where I said, hey, this shit's coming for you. Fast forward to 2021, 2022, and refunding fraud is eating retailers and merchants alive. Matter of fact, it's so popular on the good guys side, it's so popular that you see a lot of fraud analysts who have dedicated their entire career to talking about refunding fraud. That's their bread and butter. That's all they want to talk about, because they know that shit ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So I just wanted to mention that. All right. Now, to recap, to kind of go over what refunding fraud is. Refunding fraud started to pop up at Evolution Marketplace. And it's kind of interesting when you look at the development of dark web marketplaces and forums over the year. So the first three are Counterfeit Library, Carter Planet, and Shadow Crew. Counterfeit Library is the first one. I ran that. All right. So Counterfeit Library is the first one. A gentleman by the name, and we dealt with eBay fraud, PayPal fraud, fake identities, that kind of stuff. All right. A Ukrainian gentleman by the name of Dmitry Golubov. He was a spammer. He was getting all these credit card details. He saw the success that we were having with Counterfeit Library. He likes it. And he says to himself, he's like, I wonder if people would buy stolen credit card details. Well, it turns out they will. So he picks up the phone. He calls his buddies. They call their buddies. They end up having a physical conference in Odessa. 150 of these cyber criminals show up, and they launch the idea and eventually the site for CarterPlanet.com, which is the genesis of all modern credit card theft as we know it today. Now, Dmitry ends up partnering with Counterfeit Library and then Shadow Crew because, and I've spoke about this before, these three necessities of cybercrime: gathering the data, committing the crime, cashing out. All three have to work in conjunction. If they don't, the crime fails. Problem is that one criminal can't do all three things, either because of a skill gap, that criminal just doesn't know how to do one thing, or because of a geographic location. That criminal is in a geographic area where they cannot fulfill one of those three necessities. The Ukraine was a geographic problem. There had been so much fraud going on that you literally could not cash out any stolen credit card data in that part of Europe at that point. So Dmitry had to rely on outside sources to do that. And that became this partnership with Counterfeit Library and then Shadow Crew. So Counterfeit Library transitions over to Shadow Crew, which I ran that as well. Shadow Crew goes on to make the front cover of Forbes, gets busted, blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows that. All right. Now, those three sites, those three forums and marketplaces were fraud-centric. That's what they revolved around. You didn't really see until the last days of Shadow Crew, you did not see any drugs entering that environment. As Shadow Crew was coming to an end, we first allowed marijuana, then we allowed ecstasy, and then finally opiates started to make their way in. The issue is that, and as these dark web marketplaces and forums develop, when a marketplace like with Shadow Crew, we started to see the profit potential of trafficking in drugs, which it's huge. It's so huge that you really can't have a dark web market anymore unless you've got an element of drug trafficking in there. It's really that profitable. Okay. So after Shadow Crew gets shut down, you've got various other sites that pop up. You've got Carter's Market, you've got Scandinavian Carding, you've got Mazafaka, you've got the National Association for the Advancement of Criminal Activity. I think that was NACA. You've got all these other sites that start up until, and they're all kind of migrating toward that drug trafficking market. Ross Ulbricht sets up Silk Road One on the dark web. It's the first legitimate, viable, real dark web marketplace, and that is strictly it's drug centric at that point. It has some elements of fraud attached, like you could buy some stolen credit card details and whatnot, but that was a drug centric site. And it continues. Of course, Ross gets caught. He gets 2 life sentences, 40 years in prison. He gets, we get the Silk Road 2. We get Sheeple Marketplace or Sheep Marketplace. We get all these other marketplaces that pop up. Finally, 2013, around 2012, 2013, Evolution Marketplace pops up. Evolution Marketplace saw that return because up until then, everything had transitioned over to drug-centric. Evolution Marketplace transitioned back to a fraud-centric marketplace, which was very important because now you had fraudsters that were able to engage in a forum, a large communication channel again, and they were able to share and exchange information. And the doing of such also led to innovation in the types of crime that we were seeing. One of the types of crime that we saw, we started to see individuals come into Evolution and they were saying, hey, I'm making $10,000 a month on Amazon refunds, to which everyone in the community responded to that. You, sir, are full of shit. No one makes that money doing refunding fraud. Well, it turns out they were not full of shit. There were people making $10,000 a month doing Amazon refunds. And the way that worked is it was hitting Amazon. You would open up or apply for a Prime free trial. It was like 60, 90 days. You would use your card, your name, your address. You would order a MacBook Pro. Amazon would ship it out. It would arrive 2 days later. They'd leave it on your doorstep. You'd get on the phone, get on a chat session. Hey, I didn't get it. I know it shows that it's been delivered, but there ain't nothing here. Amazon would ship you out another MacBook Pro. It would arrive 2 days later. They'd leave it on your doorstep. You'd get back on the chat session, back on the phone. Hey, I know you guys said you sent it, but there ain't nothing here. Amazon at that point would refund you your money. So in the space of about 10 days, you'd get 2 laptops and your money back. Highly profitable because Apple shit sells at a high dollar or resells at a high dollar. It wasn't just laptops. It was 65-inch color televisions. It was living room sofas. It was anything and everything that criminals wanted and everything that Amazon sold. It ate Amazon alive. Criminals were sharing and exchanging information. It became so popular that you had dedicated sub-forums strictly to refunding fraud. Now, here's where remember I mentioned these new criminals who, they're coming into the environment. We're going to see a lot of them coming into the environment because of the economy. You also get criminals that come in, or would-be criminals that come into the environment because maybe they've read some news story about Brett Johnson stealing $160K a week, or Albert Gonzalez having $1 million buried under a doghouse in his yard. Whatever the friggin' story is, you get these people coming into the environment. These would-be aspiring criminals, they don't have a skill set. Now, the way it used to work for these would-be criminals coming in is you would get a new cyber criminal coming in. They would typically buy stolen credit card details, and then they would try to defraud Amazon or Apple, get some laptop somewhere, and they would fail miserably because that shit requires a degree of skill. At that point, most of the people would decide that their careers as aspiring cyber criminals was simply not going to work out. And most of them would go get a job or they would get their asses in school. You would have a select few that would stick around and decide to learn how to do these things. So they would still engage in credit card theft, except they'd hit the soft targets, food services, clothing sites, stuff like that, until they got the skills necessary, had developed that tool set in order to go out there and get those laptop computers or Rolex watches or whatever the hell they were looking for. All right. Because of refunding fraud, that changes. Because of refunding fraud, now you get an aspiring criminal coming in. They don't have to have a skill set in order to start profiting. They immediately engage in refunding fraud. And at the base level, if they've got the capital, at the base level, they can profit $20,000 a week doing refunding fraud. There's a little work to it, but absolutely no skills involved whatsoever. So some of these criminals, one of the other things that you notice is that somebody who's starting out their criminal career, they don't have any confidence whatsoever. They're newbies. They don't know what the hell is going on, and they're worried about being arrested. They're worried they're going to screw something up, blah, 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 blah. Well, because of that back then, and even today, we started to see professional refunders pop up. So these guys would target the individuals who wanted to engage in refunding fraud, and they would say, hey, don't worry about processing it. I'll do the refund for you. You go ahead and you place the order. Once you place the order and you get the item in, don't open it. Just contact me. I'll get your money back. And then you'll pay me somewhere between 7 to 15% of whatever the order total was. Now, the percent's raised today. It's 10 to 20%. And I'm going to show you one guy here in a minute. That's like 35% because he offers what's called an instant refund. So that was what was going on. And that leads into, over the years, as I told people back in 17, over the years, it gets outside of Amazon, it hits Apple, it hits Microsoft, and it continues to bleed down to hit every single merchant and retailer on the planet today. And that's the way this shit goes. See, cybercrime, it's really interesting. Cybercrime is a true capitalistic system, and it is a true experiment in trickle-down theory. Truly. Criminal techniques, they tend to start at the top, then they trickle down to the more bottom feeder type stuff that's going on. Look at SIM swaps, look at any number of things that go on today. That's the shit that trickles down all the time. Just kind of one of these observations that I've got. Okay, so professional refunders pop up. Refunding fraud starts to hit every single merchant and retailer across the board. Then you've got Telegram that pops up. So the problem is that the Tor browser has a lot of friction involved. If you're somebody that is not very computer savvy, and I'm going to be honest with you, most cyber criminals or fraudsters are not. If you're somebody that's not really computer savvy, you have trouble with Tor. You have to know how to use that shit properly in order to not be identified. Now, that may seem simple for some people, but for other people, that's pretty difficult. They have some real issues on that. Now, these are the same people that like to talk way too much in specific channels. They share a bit too much information, and then the po-po comes, whoop, whoop, and arrests them. So Tor has some friction to it. That's why we get sites or applications like Telegram. Now, I don't know if you guys read this or not, but as of today, Telegram is no longer secure. There's an article out talking about how the Russian government has compromised Telegram. Well, I will tell you this, if the Russians can do it, the Israelis can do it, the Americans can do it, the Brazilians can do it, the people over in the UK can do it. It's done. Now, the interesting thing, I think, is that while that's out there, and it's obvious now that Telegram, the encryption is compromised, will that stop the criminals that use Telegram every single day from using it? And I would argue that the answer is no, because a lot of these criminals, especially the refunding criminals, have a degree of entitlement, and they really don't respect that they're about to get their asses in a shitload of trouble. They don't appreciate that. It might take some time behind the fence to relay that unto them. All right. So Telegram pops up, and sites like applications like Telegram that have very little friction, that deliver a product and service where criminals can communicate, that has far less friction, has far less difficulty than what Tor has. So criminals flock to that. That's why Telegram today is really taking over the dark web as far as criminal activity and criminal discussions go. So, and that's where Noir comes in. So Noir was a refunder, one of these professional refunders. He ran a travel site as well. He ran a refunding site. He ran an advanced replacement site. He ran a mentorship channel. I say sites, they're channels. He ran a mentorship channel where you could pay him $2,500 and he would teach you how to do the shit that he was doing, everything else. And now all that's closed down. He shut it all down for whatever reason he may have shut it down. So that's refunding fraud. That's the entire process that goes through and that's the history of it. So how was refunding fraud done? Back then, 2013, the excuse given was, I didn't get it. Yeah, I know it shows delivered. It's not on my ports. I don't know where you guys delivered it. It's not here. And that was good enough to get most any company to send you a replacement item or to give you your money back, because sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes it happens. As this fraud became more popular and merchants started to realize that, hey, this is fraud. This is not a lost package or a package that was delivered to the wrong address. This is fraud. As that happens, that excuse becomes less viable. So at that point, we see a couple of other excuses or reasons to get the refund come in. We see the excuse of, yeah, hey, I got the package. Yeah, I got the package. I opened it up and the laptop ain't there. No, the box is there. Yeah, the retail box is there. The laptop box, I'm looking at it. But I opened it up. There ain't nothing there. That shit works pretty good sometimes, because I don't know if anybody else has done this. I've actually been to Best Buy. I bought like a video game, take it out, open it, and there's not a video game in there. And it's evidently it happens enough that you can go back into Best Buy and say, you can show them the empty case. Hey, there ain't nothing in here. And they'll give you another game. So that works. The big reason that's being used today is called FTID, it's tracking identification. Is fake tracking identification, what it stands for. Okay, so you take the return label, you inform the merchant that you want a refund, that you're going to send the item back to them. They send you a return mail label for FedEx, for UPS, DHL, wherever they're doing. They send you that label. Now, what you can do is you can take the label and you can take certain elements of that's on the label. You can take certain things on that label off, because that shipping label doesn't just have the shipper information for FedEx, DHL, or UPS. It's also got the order information. It's got the person's name. It's got the order number. It's got all these other details on that one return label. So you can remove that stuff where the only thing that's on there is just the information that the carrier needs. That way, when it arrives to the return center, they scan it in. They don't know what order it's associated with, anything else. It registers in the system as being returned, but they can't correlate the contents of the package to what was actually to the order that was placed. It takes a lot of time and effort to do that, and delays finding out that it was fraudulent. Better than that, you can manipulate the shipping label to where the item isn't even delivered to a return center. Instead, it's delivered to some area, to some other address within that delivery zone, so that it looks like when it's delivered, it's scanned in as delivered. The company's the merchant sees that it's been delivered. They think it's been delivered to them, but it's not. So the item becomes lost at that point. That is really the most popular way to do that. Now, that you may think that requires a degree of skill. It does not. It does not, because there are countless tutorials that show exactly what you need to remove from that label. Or you can pay someone somewhere between $15 to $25 to do it for you. So again, no skill is required whatsoever into doing that. Now, there's another new thing that's popping up recently. This thing called lost in transit. So the item, either on the way to you or as you're shipping it back, becomes lost in transit, typically with UPS. So it's just there. It's just, it's in a system. Yeah, I see the tracking information. It shows that it's at this station. It's been at this station for 8 weeks. It ain't moved from that station. It says pending delivery. Will update when possible. That lost in transit is very effective. And one of the reasons that it works so well is that sometimes that technique involves insiders. So you've got UPS insiders or wherever right now the chatter is on Telegram and on Dread on the dark web. The chatter is that UPS has some insiders that can get large orders lost in transit so that you get the product and you get your money back. So those are the ways that refunding fraud is typically committed. As far as the individual committing them, I said before that you start out, and it's almost historically the same across the board. That fraudster starts out by using his real name, his credit card, his address. All right. He hits Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, whatever camera store, Walmart, Costco, Sam, whatever he's hitting, he hits that place. Now, here's the thing. You've only got so many times that you can use your address, your bank card, and your name until the company catches on with, hey, I think this address, we keep losing stuff from them. We've given a lot of money in returns or refunds to this address. It may take a minute, but even the most slow merchant finally realizes that, hey, this name and address and this payment instrument, we ain't going to accept anymore, and they'll ban the account sometimes. As a result, that fraudster, what does he do? He goes around, he mines his address out until he can't use it anymore with any number of merchants. He then starts looking at family members' addresses, friends' addresses. He uses them to the same extent. At the same time, he does that with his credit card or with his debit card. So he's got an account set up with Chase or Wells or some credit union, someplace, whatever. He mines that out to where, hey, that card, I can't use that anymore to do this type of fraud. So then he has to open up another bank account. So then in his area or wherever he is, he goes through every single bank account that he can use. So finally, with using his name and his real information, he is unable to use the addresses that he used to have and to set up more bank accounts. So at that point, he starts to use prepaid debit cards or gift cards to fund the accounts so that he can do refunding fraud. So he puts, X amount of gift cards on the account. So you go out and buy 6 $500 gift cards. You add all those to Amazon. So you got $300 credit on Amazon. You order the MacBook Pro, you get it in, then you claim, it didn't show up or you're going to return it for a refund or what have you. You get the money credited back to the account, and then you try to sell that account or cash out those gift cards that are attached to it as quickly as possible. Maybe send the gift cards to someone else, whatever you need to do. All right. When a criminal gets to that point that they're no longer using traditional banking instruments to engage in this fraud, it becomes much easier to spot it as fraud. Much easier. So you got some idiot that adds 5 gift cards or has a prepaid debit card that he's using to fund an account. You can go by the BIN on the card. The BIN is the bank identification number. First 6 digits of that credit or debit card tells you the type of card that it is and the issuing bank. So you can go by that, see that it's a prepaid instrument that is looking for a refund. And fraudsters, where they used to do this stuff, and they're still doing it to a degree like that, is they would realize that the merchant, one of the first security measures that was put in place by Amazon, and then other merchants followed that as well, was seeing if the account had any history on it. And if it didn't, they got to the point it was very difficult to get a refund if you were trying to pull that fraud. So what fraudsters started to do was they would say, hey, make sure when you're doing this, so you set up the account, you got a new Amazon Prime account or wherever the account is, buy a couple of small dollar items, get that in, and then you can hit them for the large ticket one. And that worked for a while as well. All right. So add in all that and the type of payment instrument, it becomes much easier to start identifying refunding fraud, those criminals who are engaged in that type of fraud. The problem is that innovation, and I used to teach this on Shadow Creek when I ran that. This was one of the sayings that we had. Innovation breeds supremacy. If you can innovate, you will win at the end of the day. For criminals to innovate, they have to be comfortable in their environment. They have to share and exchange information and also be able to bullshit with each other, not be judged by their criminal peers. They can throw out stupid shit sometimes, and sometimes the stupid shit that they're throwing out of their mouth, sometimes somebody says, hey, that's not such a bad idea. Let's try that. Well, Noir comes up with a way to fix that problem so that criminals don't have to use prepaid debit cards or gift cards. And what he does is he uses synthetic identities. So for those who don't know, and I've not done a show yet on synthetic fraud, but I'm going to. Today's show is refunding fraud. The next show will be romance fraud. That I'm going to do 2 or 3 episodes on my story, because I'm, 30 some episodes into this show and I've still not given my in-depth biography yet. So we're going to do that. Then we'll get to synthetic fraud and some of these other things. All right. But Noir comes up with the idea of, hey, instead of worrying about, because you're running out of addresses, you're running out of identities, which means you're running out of the ability to open up more and more bank accounts to engage in this fraud, why don't we just use synthetic identities to open up bank accounts? So for those who don't know what a synthetic identity is, 2011, the Social Security Administration, they randomized Social Security numbers. They do that in order to defeat a specific type of identity fraud. Turns out that numbers issued before 2011, if I know the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, if I know the state you're born in and the year you're born, it's very easy for me to generate the first 5 digits of that Social Security number. It's a very popular type of fraud. The IRS was having, not the IRS, but the Social Security Administration was having a lot of issues with that. So they randomized the number to stop that specific type of fraud. Now you can no longer tell the year the social was issued or the state it was issued in. And it stops that fraud completely. I mean, it kills it friggin' dead. But while they killed that fraud, because now you don't know the year the social was issued or the state it was issued in, everything's random for all Social Security numbers issued after 2011. Now, criminals can use a child Social Security number, or they can generate a Social Security number using an algorithm and create a person out of thin air. So typically what will happen is you'll go on the dark web. You'll buy a child's identity. Now, 3-4 years ago, children's information used to sell for $2 a piece. So for $2, you'd get the kid's name, social, date of birth, mother's maiden name, place of birth. Because of synthetic fraud, children's identities now go for about $25 a piece for the exact same information. So you'd go on the dark web, you'd buy a kid's identity. The only thing you wanted really was the Social Security number. You take the social, you'd add a name to it, an adult date of birth, an address, a phone number. You would apply for credit. Now, here's the thing. When you apply for credit, credit bureaus don't know you exist until you tell them you exist. If they've never seen that data before, the application for credit will be denied. But when it's denied, it actually creates a credit report in the credit bureau system with that information. So now you've got a ghost in the system. That synthetic person has a credit report. It's a very thin credit report, absolutely no history on it whatsoever, brand new, all that stuff. At the same time that you're doing that, you have to realize that when someone pulls a credit report, when they run your credit, it's not just the credit report they're looking at. They're looking for any type of open source intelligence, which associates the name with the address. What is out there that we can pull that identifies you? So to defeat that, usually you go, as a criminal, you go to some place like listyourself.net, which is a free white pages listing service. You input that synthetic information, the name, the address, the phone number. Within a few weeks, that address starts to receive physical spam mail in that synthetic's name. At the same time, any type of internet scrapers that are out there start to find that information that you've put in. While you're doing that, you go out and you apply for rewards cards. Grocery, airline, pharmacy. You may want to build a Facebook page. Don't have to, doesn't hurt. More important, build your ass a LinkedIn page, because some security companies are looking at that. All right. So that takes care of OSINT. They get you in the credit bureau system. Now, the thing is, Not all synthetic profiles are created equally. So synthetics have traditionally targeted both financial institutions and creditors. Criminal would set up a CPN. A CPN is what criminals call it, a credit privacy or credit profile number. They would set up that synthetic identity, and then they would pump the credit up to the point where they could open up new accounts and then use that to profit. And depending on how they did that, they could profit anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 per profile up to a couple $100,000 per profile. So it always historically, it targeted financial institutions and creditors. Merchants would see it because the new cards or the new accounts that was getting product from the merchants were set up with synthetics, but the merchant was not liable for those purchases. You see, that's one of the things about this is that for identity theft, traditional identity theft, the merchant's liable. For synthetic identity theft, the merchant is not liable. The financial institution or the credit issuer is liable for that transaction at that point, okay? So historically, the merchant has never had to worry about that. And as I said, there are not every synthetic profile is created equally. If you're looking to profit and hit the financial institution or the creditor setting up new accounts, that takes some time and effort to do that. You have to be entered into the credit bureau system. Then you have to do credit piggybacking or have first-party reporting to pump up that credit score to the point where you can open up new accounts, get those credit cards, and then use those credit cards to steal, all right? But Noir realizes this, and he says to himself, hey, we don't need that type of synthetic profile. We only need a synthetic profile strong enough to be able to open up a bank account, because not all synthetics are equal, and not all synthetics require the amount of work involved to profit if you're hitting, depending on who you're going to profit. So they start to use synthetic profiles to engage in refunding fraud. So you open up the synthetic, you get it entered into the credit bureau system. That's really the only thing you have to do in order to go over and then open up a bank account. Once you open up the online bank account, guess what? You fund that online bank account legitimately. You don't fund it with stolen currency. You don't do fraud to get it funded. You actually send money into that account, get it funded, and then you hit the merchant on refund fraud. That way you've got a brand new name, whatever drop address that you're using, and a brand new card, not a prepaid debit card, not a gift card, but a bank issued debit card or credit card to engage in refunding fraud. That is very effective when it comes to hitting a merchant. So the thing is that the types of security over the years that merchants have put into place. You get Amazon starts with, does the account have history on it? Then they institute this thing. Well, any type of refund, if you're saying the package did not arrive, that it was stolen off of your porch, we are going to require you to send us a police report. That's right. You must contact the Popo, file a report, and send that to us. So Amazon starts to demand this. Amazon forgets that criminals like to test everything. So someone on Evolution says out loud, hey, I wonder if they're actually verifying police reports. So they Photoshop one, send its ass in, they get the refund. Comes to find out, Amazon was not verifying police reports. So that sets up a little cottage industry where for the next 6 months, you can buy Photoshop police reports for $25 a piece, and they eat Amazon alive for another 6 months until Amazon starts to verify those police reports. And at that point, it becomes this cat and mouse game. There's a reason today that when Amazon delivers a package, they take a photo of that package sitting on your porch. That is specifically because of refunding fraud. That is the only reason that shit started. Amazon then starts to they take pictures of the packages being packed at the warehouse now. They make sure that the packages are weighed so that you can't claim that, hey, yeah, the retail box is here, but they ain't no laptop in the box. So they weigh the shit. They've got all these things in place to try to stop refunding fraud. Now, here's the secret. This starts around 2013 with Amazon. It is now 2022, and Amazon today it is still possible to defraud Amazon with refunding fraud. As a matter of fact, why not? Let's go over to Telegram real quick and we'll show this. Okay, so this is Telegram. This is the rec refund service. And lo and behold, first thing up out of the gate, I've already done the search for refunding fraud, but this is his channel. Claims he has 26,000 subscribers. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But he's offering Amazon refunds. So Amazon.com, you can order 5 to 10 items, a limit of $15,000. So when in 2013, when this started, the limit was $5,000 to $6,000. So the monetary limit that you can defraud Amazon on has actually increased over the years. At the same time, if you want an instant refund, if you're going through UPS, if you can convince Amazon to let you ship it back UPS or ship it to you UPS, you have no limit on the items or the cash, and the refund is instant. And he's got the different types of domains for Amazon, the different dollar amounts that are available. He charges, what's he charge? He charges 25%. And if you're going to pay him by PayPal to process a refund for you, make that 30%. So he's got all kinds of things here. Here's Walmart, no price limit, no item limit, USA only. Freight items work, blah, blah, blah. He charges 30 to 35% of the order total. Costco, same thing, no price limit, and a 5-item limit. You get your refund in 3 to 7 days. You can order Apple items if you want to. He's going to charge you 25% of the item total. There's another one for Amazon. Blah, 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 blah. So that is a glimpse of Telegram, a glimpse of some of the advertisements that are shown. What I'm trying to get through to you is that Amazon has a shitload of money. They've got some of the best security on the planet. And even with all of that money, all of that security, refunding fraud is still going on at Amazon. This is an extremely difficult crime. You're not going to stop it. The best you can do is try to mitigate it. So that's what I wanted to show. That I'm going to pull up one more site here while we're talking. I'm going to pull up one more site while we're talking, because I wrote a couple blogs on this earlier, and we're going to share Telegram again here. Not Telegram. We're going to share our screen here again in a minute and talk about some of the solutions. All right. So let me get my little notes back up here. So that's the use of synthetics. One of the things that's really interesting on Telegram is you see people coming into these refunding channels, and it's often mentioned, not often, it's always talked about how no one is ever prosecuted for refunding fraud. That's one of the selling points. Hey, yes, you can get your laptop, you can get your PlayStation 5, you can get whatever you want to. Don't worry about it. Ain't nobody going to jail. The merchants don't do shit about it, which to a large extent is somewhat true. What I have seen is that if merchants are aware of it, and nowadays most merchants are, but almost always the dollar amount that they're figuring in that they're being hit with or defrauded by on refunding fraud is far lower than the actual amount. Worse even still is that a lot of the times refunding fraud isn't even considered fraud. So the fraud department doesn't handle it. Instead, who handles it is the customer service department. So those numbers aren't even figured into fraud losses, and the professionals who should be handling it aren't. So you get that type of thing, these issues that pop up across the board. You've got, I've mentioned before, this siloed type security where you've got a return center that isn't part of the actual merchant operations or the retailer operations. They've got an offsite center or maybe a third-party center where things are returned to. And that creates an issue because there's very little communication from that. So I send in a return to a return center. They scan it in that it's been returned. Sometimes they're days, weeks, months processing that return, opening up the box, seeing what's in it. Sometimes they don't even do that. They open up the box, they throw its at whatever contents in a bin someplace. So it becomes very difficult to even know if the correct item was returned. Fraudsters capitalize on that. They know that, so they use that to their advantage, that lack of communication, that lack of checking things, the lack of an investigation. It used to be Amazon got to the point where they would institute a carrier investigation where you would say, hey, I didn't get the item. And Amazon would notify FedEx or UPS. FedEx would pick up the phone and try to call you. Or they sometimes, depending on the dollar amount of loss, they might show up at your freaking door and knock. At which point you would simply, if you did make the mistake of answering the phone, most fraudsters were told, don't even answer the phone. They're only going to try to call once or twice. It's going to go away and you're still going to get the refund. So that's typically what happened. If you did make the mistake of answering the phone, if they asked if there were any problems, you would say, nope, no problems here. And the carrier would end the investigation and you'd still get the refund at the end of the day. So that's what happened at that point. So refunding fraud today, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, I'm at the National Retail Federation later this week, giving a presentation, just a 30-minute talk on refunding fraud. Turns out that your humble host of the Brett Johnson Show is one of the most well-versed motherfuckers on the planet when it comes to talking about refunding fraud. I know a whole shitload about it. So we'll be talking to the people there, trying to convince them to communicate with each other, trying to convince them to prosecute, trying to convince them to work with law enforcement, which you would think they would be eager to work with law enforcement, and a lot of merchants and retailers are. There are some very big ones that, by God, they want this stuff to stop, and they work and they hand over information to the FBI. They help them with investigations, everything else. We need more of that. So I'm going to go back. Actually, I think I'll pull up. Yeah, let's share the screen because I don't want people to think I'm just pulling this stuff out of my ass. I actually did a lot of research about how you can. So this is again on cybercrime101.com, the blog section. I've got 3 blogs written. First, what is refund fraud? How does it happen? And then finally, can it be stopped? And bottom line is I say, can refund fraud be stopped? And I say, no need for pillow talk. It cannot. And I use Amazon as an example. I have yet to see any merchant able to completely stop refunding fraud simply because, hey, merchants offer refunds. They do. Sometimes packages get lost. Sometimes you don't get the item in the box. And because of that, it's easy enough for a criminal to come in and, depending on how much time and effort that criminal wants to put into it, convince that retailer to either give them a refund or to send out a replacement product. So over the years, Amazon employed a variety of tools, techniques, and policies to mitigate, not to stop, but to mitigate refunding fraud. They did police reports. They did data analysis. So they would look at all the orders, try to identify a refunder that was working multiple profiles or a geographic area, payment instruments, any number of things. They looked at rules-based and machine learning systems. Because Amazon started out as a rules-based system, it was very easy to game that. So my name is Brett Johnson. My first order, I would put Brett Johnson. My second order, I may change the name to Brent Johnson or B period Johnson. And that would bypass a rules-based system. So they started to use, and I could do the address the same way. So instead of 112 Oak Street, I would put 112 Oak or 1 and then a space 12 Oak Street or any number of things. You would just change the layout of the address and the name and maybe the spelling of that, and it would bypass a rules-based system. So companies started to use, and Amazon started to use, more machine learning type systems that you couldn't manipulate the name and address in order to game that system. They banned and blocked accounts. For a long time, Amazon simply would not block an account that had committed refund fraud, and that allowed a criminal to come in and do refunding fraud on the same account multiple times. So that was another security measure. Another security measure is they required signature for some deliveries. The high dollar items, a signature was required, and that means you had to show an ID in order to get it. The driver would hand you the package, would ask for an ID, you'd show him an ID, he would make sure it matched the name that's on the box. You would sign at that point, verify that it was delivered to you. Amazon started to launch internal and carrier investigations. So not only a carrier investigation, but they would pull an investigation with the warehouse. They would make sure that the item was a video of the item being packed. So we make sure that an insider's not stealing anything. So they would do internal and carrier investigations. They would conduct a review of refund requests. Not all, but if the refund request hit a certain dollar amount, it required authorization. And then they would pull it sometimes for a manual review. And that was just some of the techniques, the security measures that Amazon put into place. So, and I really think that Amazon gives a good model on how to deal with refunding fraud. So, data matters. You have to have real-time data. You have to look at the environment that everything's going in at the entire session. You have to compare that to the other sessions that are out there, the normal user that is out there. Is this normal activity? Is this normal activity on this account? Does anything raise a flag? If it does, you pull it, you start looking at it at that point. You have to properly analyze that specific data. You have to use a combination of rules-based and machine learning and know where and how to use them properly. You have to, the signature required, pick up at station, delivery snapshots that Amazon does, absolutely, that is a necessity these days. Making sure that things are weighed, that package is weighed as it's leaving the warehouse. You need to do that because you will get a fraudster that pops in and says, hey, wasn't in the box. Well, if it's the correct damn weight, something was in the box. What was it? And then you can verify that if you've got snapshots of it being packed, any number of things like that. Internal and carrier investigations as well. I advise slowing things down. So a lot of fraudsters do not stockpile cash. A lot of fraudsters, they have X amount of dollars. They'll use those dollars to commit a crime, get the proceeds from that fraud in pocket, and then they won't commit another fraud. They won't stockpile cash. Most fraudsters don't save money. It's the rare fraudster that does that. I did that. Albert Gonzalez did that. A few other people as well. Most fraudsters simply commit a crime, get the proceeds, live off of those proceeds until it starts to dwindle down. Then they bankroll their next fraud. Rinse and repeat over and over. So what I tell a lot of merchants out there is simply slow things down. A fraudster is going to go after the easiest target that gives the largest, quickest return on his or her investment. So instead of giving a refund in 24 hours, if you can slow that down to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, what have you, that sends a message, because during that length of time, that fraudster don't have any money coming in. So he's going to look for a more viable, quicker target to hit. So slow things down. Processes and policies, you've got to have those in place. You've got to examine where the failure is. Is it in that you're not verifying the item before you give up the refund? So what are your policies and procedures? Verify that, do an investigation on that, make sure you've got the proper ones in there that handle refund fraud without causing friction to the legitimate users that are out there. You've got to communicate and listen, not just to your return center, which you're probably not communicating with. So you've got to communicate with them, but you've also got to communicate with customer service. Customer service needs to communicate with the fraud analysts that are out there, the fraud team, everything else across the board. Time and time again, I've seen how, hey, there's very little communication and sharing of information that goes on. It's weird, man. It's weird. Criminals are all about sharing and exchanging information. The good guys are not. So with other companies, it's either, you've got privacy concerns, you've got regulations, you've got competitive edges so that one company is being hit and they don't want to share that with any other company in their vertical because they're hoping the fraudsters will go over there. But that lack of communication is also internal. You've got a lot of competition in those companies where the fraud team thinks that, oh, we know everything. We know everything. We don't need nobody to tell us nothing. Them customer service people, they don't know shit. So you ain't going to tell us nothing. Meanwhile, customer service, they know what the hell they're seeing every single day. So it's important to communicate, and it goes vice versa too. Customer service, I ain't talking to those fraud people. They're uppity. They don't know what the hell they're doing. I ain't talking to them. Same thing goes for management. Management sometimes doesn't want to hear that shit. They think they know everything. You have to be open-minded. You have to be open-minded. You have to get rid of the dogma. You have to get rid of that. That's pride. To quote Marcellus Wallace, That's pride fucking with you. So you got to get rid of that. All right. You got to know how refunders pay. I mentioned that before. There's a reason that fraudsters are migrating over to using synthetic profiles, because if a refund is taking place that the account's been funded by a gift card or prepaid debit card, that's pretty easy to spot that it's fraud at that point. So know how refunders pay. By all means, prosecute. Here's the thing, and I said this in the last episode, I'm going to say it again this episode. There are 37,000 FBI field agents spread across 56 field offices in the United States. Of those 37,000 agents, only a couple of hundred are concentrated on cybercrime. And of those couple of hundred, some of those agents are dealing with drug trafficking, nation-state attacks, bullshit like that. So if you're talking about fraud, it's a problem, especially when you consider some of these criminal communities are millions of members large. So you've got to prosecute. When you prosecute, it sends a message. Believe it or not, when you work with law enforcement and you finally prosecute some big case, it sends a message to every criminal community that, hey, this company pressed charges. We don't want to screw around with this company. Let's find another target. And that's typically what happens. All right. In order to prosecute, because you've got so few law enforcement agents that are out there, we simply don't have enough cops on the street. In order to do that, I would urge a company to make sure that they've compiled as much information as they possibly can. Don't just call law enforcement and say, yeah, we got hit with refunding fraud. Who do I talk to? No, you need to have an entire package of as much evidence ready to go. That way, when you hand that to law enforcement, they're looking at it like, shit, they got all their ducks in a row. This is easy. Let me pursue this one in front of all these other numbnuts who didn't do any research, who didn't deliver anything to us. They just told us about it. So make sure that the thing is done properly at that point. Prosecute, monitor criminal networks. I'm on Telegram every day. I'm on Dread every day. You need to know what those criminals are talking about, the techniques they're using, the targets they're looking at. Maybe they're not looking at your specific site, but they're looking at a competitor. If they are, it's coming. Maybe there's a new criminal technique out there that's not even hitting your vertical, but that trickle down is going to come to your vertical. So make sure you're monitoring criminal networks. That way you can anticipate the attacks that are out there or know the attacks that are already hitting you. All right. That's refunding fraud. At the end of the day, I really think this is a type of fraud that you're not going to stop. You mitigate it, which is, let me go ahead and stop sharing screen here. At the end of the day, you're not going to stop this. You're going to mitigate it. You're going to do the best you possibly can. And there are ways to mitigate it. That becomes the important factor. For the people who are out there, the common person, if you're not a criminal that's committing this fraud, if you're not a merchant or retailer that's defending this type of fraud, how does it affect you? Well, it affects you in ways that you've probably not understood or don't really appreciate yet. Refunds for a merchant are meant to be easy. In history, we've seen Zappos as it's a free, you can ship the item back free. They almost always give you the money very quickly, sometimes even before they receive the item back. Nowadays, because of the amount of refund fraud that's out there, refunds and returns are becoming much more complicated. So sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes you order an item and you don't get it. Now, in the past, when Amazon would do something like that, they would simply say, we are so sorry. Let me send out a new one right now. You'll get it in a couple of days. But that's changing now. Now you say, and you really didn't get the item. You say it didn't show up. Well, we need to wait a while, make sure it's going to show up. And what's the tracking information say? Well, let me contact the carrier. So there becomes all this friction that's involved where the experience is not a very pleasant one if you're a legitimate user. That's how it's affecting you. At the same time, the losses from refunding fraud, the merchant doesn't eat that shit. The merchant passes that on to you by increasing costs overall. So you've got increased friction that causes the customer experience to not be as pleasant as it used to be, and you've got increased cost at the same time. And that's, if you're not the criminal, if you're not the merchant, that's just the normal person sitting at the house every single day that's just trying to get the get by with things. that's how it happens. I'm really worried about the economy that's going to be taking, and these people that usually would not commit crime coming into this environment, because I promise you, the crime that they're going to be looking at is this crime we're talking about today. They're not going to be involved. They're not going to be doing credit card theft. They're not. There are no stimulus programs out right now where they can defraud, unemployment fraud. So the easiest access and the most profitable access is refunding fraud. So we're going to see a segment of the population, as the economy continues to decline, as employment goes up, as things go south, we're going to see a segment of the population coming in, committing refunding fraud that usually would not do this. At the same time, I need you guys to understand that a lot of criminals, those who do save money, save their criminal, money, and they save it in cryptocurrency. The problem is that we are now in a crypto winter. Bitcoin has dropped from $70,000 down to, over the weekend, it was at like 17.6. That has cost a lot of criminals who have significant crypto holdings. That has caused quite the pain in their wallets. So how do you recoup that? If your money is lost, you simply need to get out there and hustle and do even more fraud than before. These criminals, a lot of them are refund fraudsters. So we're going to see from the experienced criminals, as well as these people who feel that they don't have any other recourse, we're going to see the more experienced fraudsters upping the amount of refund fraud that's happening. All right. A lot of merchants, I think, don't. And again, I'm urging merchants to collaborate with law enforcement. I think a lot of merchants don't really consider it because they have historically been in a surging economy. Now that things are consolidating, now that things are going to go south so quickly, we're going to really see these merchants starting to notice the losses due to refunding fraud, and it's going to hit them hard. So all this together does not spell a very good time for anybody except the criminals. All right. So that's refunding fraud. Tomorrow I'm flying out to Cleveland for the NRF, the National Retail Federation. I'm going to be speaking there on Thursday morning. We're going to release this episode tomorrow morning. We're also going to release another episode on Friday that has to do with romance scams, and then go from there. Everyone out there that listens and tunes into the show, I want you guys to know that I truly, truly appreciate it. It's a very humbling experience to have the history that I've had as a criminal, a bit of a degenerate, and turn things around and be recognized for that, and have you guys tune in and give me positive responses. And by and large, I mean, I was getting some negative responses on some channel, but anymore, the responses are all positive, and I truly appreciate that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, listening. If you got ideas for shows, anything else like that, questions, hey, send them over to me. I read all the comments. I'll answer the questions either in the comments section or in the next show that would pop up. Okay. So any questions that you've got, any show suggestions, feel free to shoot them over as well. I do listen to them, and I often take them and do that. Okay. So I'm Brett Johnson. What do we say? Stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. It's very important that you keep that situational awareness at the top of the key. You got to know your environment. Is it a safe environment? Is it an environment where there are predators at play? So stay safe, stay secure, stay vigilant. More importantly, this is the Brett Johnson Show. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you for listening. Until next time.